I never thought I would find myself in this situation. My name is Brian and I was married to Kelly for 8 years. On the surface, we seemed like a perfect couple. We had a nice home in the suburbs, a decent income, and we enjoyed a pretty active social life. Kelly was my best friend, my partner, and I thought we were happy. But there were signs, little things that began to add up, and I chose to ignore them. It started with her late nights. Kelly always enjoyed going out with friends, and I never minded giving her space. After all, I had my own hobbies and friends too. But then those nights turned into something more frequent. She'd come home later than usual, and when I asked about her evening, she'd brush me off with vague answers about work or how her friends lost track of time. I'd feel a twinge of unease but tried to convince myself it was just my imagination running wild. We all have busy lives, right? Then came the subtle changes in her behavior. She started dressing differently, more stylishly, more provocatively. At first, I thought it was just her rediscovering her confidence. But a seed of doubt crept in. I caught her on her phone more often, giggling at messages and quickly putting her phone away when I came near. I should have confronted her then, but I hesitated. I kept telling myself I was being paranoid. The real turning point came one Friday evening while cleaning out our garage. I stumbled upon a small box tucked away behind old paint cans. Inside were receipts for expensive restaurants I had never heard of, places I was sure I'd never taken her. I felt my heart drop as I sifted through them, and then I found a small note. It had a name scrawled across it, Mark. My mind raced. Who the hell was Mark? I confronted Kelly the next day. I remember feeling a mix of anger and fear. I could barely even get the words out. Kelly, I found some receipts and a name. Who is Mark? Her reaction was immediate. She went pale, her eyes darting around the room as if searching for an escape. What are you talking about, Brian? That's just someone from work, she exclaimed, her voice rising. I felt my chest tighten. From work? Really? You expect me to believe that? I demanded, feeling rage bubble inside me. Don't you dare accuse me of cheating. She yelled back, the defensiveness only adding to my suspicions. She started spinning tales, saying that I was overreacting, that I was imagining things, and that she was just busy with work commitments. But her words felt hollow, like a shield against the truth. The rest of the day was a blur. I went through a whirlwind of emotions: anger, disbelief, heartbreak. I couldn't eat, couldn't focus, and I spent hours pacing around the house, replaying every moment we'd shared over the last few months. I wanted to wake up and find that this was a nightmare. The love I felt was entangled with betrayal, and I was left questioning everything. As the days went by, I couldn't shake off the feeling of betrayal. I needed to know for sure if my instincts were right, so I began digging deeper. I started watching her more closely, checking her social media when she wasn't around, and it didn't take long before I started piecing things together. I discovered Mark was a local wine collector, someone Kelly had been spending quite a bit of time with. I found photos of them at wineries, toasting with glasses of wine, laughing together. Each image felt like a dagger to my heart. There was a smugness about him, and I could picture him whispering sweet things into her ear, making promises that should have been mine. Ultimately, it was the moment I saw them together that broke me. I was parked outside a restaurant, a place I knew they frequented. I watched them through the glass, laughing, leaning into each other. It was like a scene from a movie, but the reality of it felt far more brutal. I felt rage bubble up, the kind that turns your veins icy and your heart into a clenched fist. What was I supposed to do? I was hurt, but I was also furious. I needed a plan. I wanted revenge, not just for myself, but to make them both pay for the betrayal. I thought about all those wine bottles they probably shared, and suddenly I had an idea brewing, a way to make sure his entire collection was worthless. What if I could ensure they both lost their taste for success? The thought excited me, and I felt a sense of purpose wash over me. I would make sure they felt the consequences of their actions, and that's when my plan began to take shape. I had to keep my cool, play it smart, and execute my revenge. This wasn't just about hurting them, it was about reclaiming my dignity and my life. So I started plotting my revenge against Mark, the wine collector who would soon learn just how much I valued my marriage and how much I was willing to fight for it. The next few days were a blur. My emotions swung from anger to sadness to a burning desire for revenge. I felt like a tightrope walker, balancing on the precipice of despair and the thrill of plotting my next move. In those moments of clarity, I knew I had to be strategic. I couldn't just rush in blindly. I needed to think this through. I started my research into Mark, who he was, and how he got into collecting wine. Turns out, he was quite well known in our local wine enthusiast circles. He hosted tastings and had a decent following on social media. His collection was impressive, filled with rare vintages and prized bottles that any connoisseur would drool over, but I wasn't intimidated. If anything, it made my plan more enticing. I started following Mark on social media under a pseudonym, pretending to be interested in the wine world. I would comment on his posts and ask questions about the collections he showcased. It didn't take long before he responded, and I played my part well. I feigned expertise and quickly earned his trust. It was a dark thrill to see him responding positively, never knowing who I really was. Meanwhile, I kept my distance from Kelly. I had to appear unfazed, calm, and collected. I didn't want her to suspect that I was onto her. During our conversations, I would ask about her day, her work, and the people she was involved with. She rambled on about her colleagues, dropping names but never mentioning Mark. I could see the guilt plastered across her face when our discussions wandered too close to the truth. At night, I would lie awake, thinking about revenge and how I could execute it. My plan was simple but effective. I would turn Mark's prized wine collection into a laughing stock. I wasn't going to hurt anyone physically. That wasn't my style. No, I wanted to strip away his prestige and reputation in the wine community. I wanted to expose him for the fraud I believed him to be, and I knew just how to do it. I discovered that Mark often attended exclusive wine auctions and events. I began networking and learning about the upcoming gatherings. After a few weeks of careful digging, I managed to secure an invitation to one of these events. It was a big deal in the local wine scene, and I knew it would attract everyone, including Mark. I had to go and play my cards right. The night of the event arrived, and I felt a mix of excitement and anxiety. I suited up, wanting to project an image of confidence and sophistication. When I arrived, I was met with the intoxicating aroma of various wines, the sound of laughter, and the clinking of glasses. It was overwhelming, but I kept my focus on my goal. As I mingled, I spotted Mark across the room, laughing with a group of fellow wine enthusiasts. He looked smug, like a king amongst his subjects. I felt the fire in my belly ignite even more. I approached the bar, ordered a glass, and kept my ears open for any juicy gossip that could aid my plan. Throughout the night, I casually made my way through conversations, learning more about the local wine scene. I discovered that Mark had a reputation for embellishing the stories behind his wine collection, claiming to have acquired rare bottles through exclusive connections that, quite frankly, sounded fishy. The more I listened, the more I realized that his entire persona was built on a foundation of lies. Then a thought struck me. What if I could call him out publicly, expose those lies in front of everyone? It would not only tarnish his reputation, but it would also send a clear message to Kelly that I wasn't someone to be trifled with. I didn't want to just hurt them. I wanted to obliterate their sense of security. As the evening progressed, I noticed an opportunity. Mark stood at the front of the room, preparing to present a rare bottle he had just acquired. I took a deep breath, steeling myself. This was the moment. I wove through the crowd, positioning myself close enough to ensure he would see me. I waited for him to start his speech about the bottle's prestigious background, and as he began to share his tale, I raised my hand. "Excuse me, Mark," I interrupted, projecting my voice above the murmurs. The room quieted and I felt all eyes on me. "Are you sure about that story? I heard from some people that you got that bottle through a different channel, one that raises some eyebrows." A ripple of gasps echoed through the room. Mark's face turned red, confusion washing over him as he tried to regain his composure. "Who are you?" he stammered, clearly taken aback. "Just a concerned wine lover," I replied, unable to hide my smirk. "I wouldn't want anyone to get the wrong impression of how you acquire your rare finds, especially when you boast about such exclusive connections." The crowd, initially shocked, began to murmur amongst themselves, some laughing, others eager for the drama. It was a feeding frenzy. I could see Kelly in the corner of my eye, her expression changing from curiosity to horror as she realized who I was and what I was doing. Let's just say I've done my homework, I continued, leaning into my role. And it appears the Emperor has no clothes. Maybe it's time to rethink the stories you tell, Mark. He fumbled, trying to regain control of the situation, but the damage was done. I had successfully planted doubt in the minds of everyone present, and the whispers around the room only intensified. I felt a rush of exhilaration, knowing I had not only targeted Mark but had also inadvertently turned the spotlight on Kelly. As the night faded, I remained calm and collected, but inside I was swirling with a mix of satisfaction and anxiety. I had set my revenge in motion, and I could only hope it would unravel everything they had built together. I left the event, my heart pounding, ready to face whatever fallout would come next. The pieces were in play. Now it was time to watch the chaos unfold. The days following the wine event were a whirlwind. I'd expected some backlash from Mark and Kelly, but nothing could prepare me for the magnitude of the storm I had inadvertently unleashed. The next morning, the news of my outburst at the event spread like wildfire. I'd turned the local wine community into a theater, and everyone seemed to be casting their opinions on the drama. It started with the phone calls. The first was from Kelly, her voice shaky and defensive. "Brian, what the hell was that last night? You embarrassed me in front of everyone." "Embarrassed you?" I shot back, unable to contain my anger. "What about the embarrassment you've caused me? You think I'm the one who should be embarrassed?" "Don't go there," she replied, her voice rising. "You're being irrational. Everyone has their stories about wine. It's all in good fun. You had no right to call him out like that." "Good fun?" I asked incredulously. "Is that what you call it when your husband discovers you've been cheating? Because from where I'm standing it looks like a whole lot more than just fun." "Stop twisting things around," she snapped. "Mark is just a friend, just a friend." I interrupted, disbelief flooding my voice. "You have a funny way of showing what friendship looks like. You think I'm going to just sit here and let you treat me like a fool?" She went quiet for a moment, and it hit me that she was realizing the gravity of her situation. "I'm not cheating on you, Brian, I swear," she finally said, but I could hear the desperation in her tone. "It was just a misunderstanding." "A misunderstanding? You think I'm going to buy that?" I laughed bitterly. "This isn't just about Mark, Kelly. This is about us and everything we built together. I can't trust you anymore." After that phone call, I felt a surge of relief and clarity. I had laid my cards on the table, and there was no going back. I watched as Mark's social media spiraled into chaos. He tried to post damage control, but people were already calling him out, asking questions about his authenticity and the stories he'd told. The wine community turned on him, and I couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction. I had set the wheels of his downfall in motion. But the satisfaction came with its own weight. My relationship with Kelly grew increasingly strained. She spent days in a whirlwind of anger mixed with guilt. I could see her struggling between defending her actions and needing to salvage what was left of our marriage. One evening she came home late, her eyes red. "I don't know what to do, Brian. Everyone's talking about what happened. Mark is furious. He's threatening to expose things about us unless I back off," she said, almost pleading. "That sounds like a personal issue between you and Mark," I replied coldly. "You should have thought about that before you decided to give him your time." Looked defeated, and for the first time I saw a glimpse of the sadness I felt mirrored in her eyes. "I never wanted it to get this far. I just wanted to feel alive again. I didn't think it would turn into this," she admitted, her voice breaking. "Feel alive?" I echoed, my voice laced with bitterness. "So what, you thought a fling would rekindle some spark you've lost? You risked everything for a thrill." "I didn't think of it like that," she protested, but I could hear the cracks in her argument. "I thought it was harmless, just wine and conversations." "Nothing is harmless when it involves betrayal," I cut in, the anger bubbling back to the surface. "You should have considered the consequences of your actions before you threw yourself into whatever this was." The conversation spiraled into accusations and tears, but amidst the chaos, I started to see a different side of Kelly. She was scared and cornered. Yes, What she did was wrong, but she was grappling with the fallout of her choices. For the first time, I felt a mixture of empathy and anger. As the days turned into a week, I watched the fallout from my public confrontation unfold. Mark became a pariah in the local wine scene, and while that brought me some sense of satisfaction, it also made me realize that Kelly was caught in the crossfire. She was being pulled into a drama of her own making, and I had to decide how to handle it. I decided to confront Mark directly. I was tired of the games, tired of hiding behind my revenge. I wanted to face him man to man. A few days later, I found out he would be attending a local wine tasting event. I arrived early, steeling myself for what might come. When I saw him, he was surrounded by a small group of wine enthusiasts, but he looked different. The confidence he once exuded had been replaced with a tense demeanor, and it appeared he was trying to salvage what little reputation he had left. I approached him, and he turned, eyes narrowing. "Brian," he said, voice dripping with venom. "What do you want?" "Just a word, Mark," I replied, keeping my tone even. "I think we need to discuss the mess you've created." He scoffed, crossing his arms. "Mess? You mean the mess you caused? You think you can just waltz in here and play the hero? I have connections, Brian. You're just a jealous husband." "Jealous? No, I'm here for Kelly. She may have made a mistake, but you took advantage of that," I shot back, feeling the anger surge. "You used her, and now you want to play the victim." He laughed, but it was hollow. "You have no idea what I went through. You think this was all fun and games. I didn't ask for this drama, but you just had to make a scene, didn't you?" "Don't twist this on me," I said, feeling frustration mount. "You think your wine collection makes you untouchable. You think you can throw her into the spotlight and walk away without consequences. Don't worry about Kelly. I'll take care of her," he shot back, and that was the tipping point. "Take care of her? You think you can just sweep this under the rug?" I stepped closer, lowering my voice. "She deserves better than your lies and manipulation." For a moment we stood there, glaring at each other, the tension palpable. It was like a standoff, two men facing the consequences of a broken relationship. I realized then that my revenge wasn't just about hurting him. It was about standing up for what I believed in and reclaiming my dignity. In that moment, I made a decision. I wasn't just going to fight for my marriage. I was going to fight for Kelly's right to choose her path. I would give her the space to decide if she wanted to rebuild what we had or continue down this road of destruction. As I walked away from Mark, I felt a sense of resolve wash over me. It was no longer just about revenge. It was about healing, confronting truths, and figuring out where to go from here. The next chapter wouldn't be easy, but I knew that whatever lay ahead, I would face it head on. The storm was far from over, but I had finally taken some control of my life back. After my confrontation with Mark, I felt a weight had been lifted, but the emotional toll was far from over. I returned home that evening, my mind racing with thoughts of Kelly and the precarious situation we were in. I had made my point to Mark, but now I needed to focus on my relationship with my wife. I was ready to talk, but I had no idea how Kelly would respond. As I walked through the door, I found her sitting on the couch, staring at the TV with a vacant expression. She looked up when I entered, her eyes searching my face for answers. "How did it go?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I took a deep breath, sinking down onto the chair across from her. "It was tense," I admitted. "But I wanted to confront him about how he's been treating you. I think he's got you wrapped around his finger." Her expression shifted, a mixture of relief and sorrow washing over her features. "I didn't want you to get involved, but I'm glad you did. I don't know what to do now." "Neither do I replied, feeling the weight of uncertainty settle back on my shoulders. "But we need to talk about this mess. You need to figure out what you want." She nodded, tearing her gaze from mine. "I've been doing a lot of thinking. I know I messed up. I thought I was just having some fun, but now it feels like I've lost everything." I leaned forward, my heart aching for her. "You didn't just lose everything, Kelly. We lost everything together. I need to know if you want to fix this, if you still want us." Her eyes filled with tears as she looked back at me, and I could see the conflict raging inside her. "I do want us. I love you, Brian, but I got caught up in the excitement of it all. I didn't mean for it to go this far. You need to understand that this is more than a mistake. You put my trust on the line," I said, my voice firm but softened by the pain I felt inside. If we're going to even think about moving past this, we need to be honest with each other. Kelly wiped her eyes, nodding as if trying to gather her thoughts. I want to be honest. I'll tell you everything. I don't want to lose you. Then start by being open with me. How did it get to this point? I asked, my heart racing. I needed to know the details to understand how she could betray me so easily. She inhaled deeply, her voice trembling. At first, it was just innocent. I met Mark at a wine tasting event and we clicked. He knew so much about wine and I felt flattered by his attention. It was exciting to feel desired again. She paused, her hands shaking. But then it spiraled. We started texting more and I began spending time with him outside of work. It felt harmless until it didn't. Did you ever think about how I would feel? I pressed, frustration creeping into my voice. I was right. Here, not even aware that something was wrong in our marriage. I didn't want to admit that I was unhappy, she said, her voice breaking. I thought I could find that spark again without hurting you. I didn't realize how much damage I was causing. The conversation hung heavy between us. I felt the anger bubbling again, but I was also starting to understand her perspective. Kelly, this isn't just about you finding yourself or trying to feel alive again. It's about the fact that you chose to break our vows. That means something. I know, she said, tears streaming down her cheeks as she spoke. I regret it every day. I felt like the worst person ever since it happened. I just wanted to escape from the routine and I thought Mark was fun, but now I see it was a huge mistake. I took a moment to gather my thoughts. What do you want moving forward? Do you want to work on this? Because if you do, it's going to take a lot of effort from both of us. I want us, Brian. I want to rebuild. I'll do whatever it takes, she said, determination flickering in her eyes. I'm willing to cut ties with Mark completely, but I need your trust back. Trust is earned, Kelly. It won't come back overnight, I warned, my heart racing. But I'm willing to try if you are. We need to be transparent with each other, and you have to understand that I'll be watching closely. I understand, she replied, her voice steady, and I could sense the sincerity in her words. I'll do anything to make it right. I just need you to give me a chance. As the conversation unfolded, I felt a flicker of hope ignite within me. It wouldn't be easy, but we both seemed committed to the idea of rebuilding our relationship. We talked late into the night, laying bare our feelings, fears, and regrets. I shared my own insecurities, and she opened up about her struggles and how she had felt disconnected. In that moment, I realized that we were both guilty of neglecting our marriage. I had taken her for granted, and she had sought validation in all the wrong places. The mutual understanding was a necessary step forward. As days turned into weeks, we embarked on a journey of healing. We sought couples therapy to navigate the complexities of our feelings. The sessions were tough, peeling back layers we had both tried to bury. We had to confront our shortcomings, learn to communicate effectively, and rebuild the foundation of trust that had been shattered. Meanwhile, I kept an eye on Mark from a distance. I wanted to make sure he understood that this was not just a game. It was real life, and there were consequences for his actions. I didn't want to engage with him directly again, but I wanted to make sure he didn't think he could just walk away unscathed. One day, I learned that he was hosting another wine tasting event. I felt a surge of anger, but it was tempered by the progress Kelly and I had made. I decided to attend, not to cause trouble, but to ensure that he understood the stakes. When I walked into the venue, my heart raced. I spotted Mark in the corner, chatting with a group of attendees. I approached him with purpose, my resolve firm. "We need to talk, Mark." He turned, his expression shifting from surprise to irritation. "What now, Brian? I just want to remind you that this isn't over. I know you're trying to move on, but you don't get to play the victim here," I said, holding his gaze steadily. "Kelly is trying to rebuild, and you need to stay out of her life. You've caused enough damage." He looked at me, a smirk playing on his lips. "You think you can just threaten me? I thought you were smarter than that." "I'm not threatening you. I'm simply stating facts. If you want to keep your reputation intact, you'll let her go. No more texts, no more phone calls, just back off," I said firmly, refusing to back down. "Fine, whatever. She's your problem now," he replied, his tone dismissive. But the tension in his eyes told me he understood the weight of my message. As I walked away, I felt a mixture of satisfaction and relief. I had stood my ground, and while the battle wasn't over, I felt like I was finally taking control of my life. I was no longer just a victim. I was actively fighting for my marriage and my future. Back at home, I found Kelly waiting for me, her eyes filled with concern. "What happened?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "I talked to Mark. He needed to understand that he's out of your life for good." She nodded, relief washing over her face. "Thank you for standing up for us." I smiled, but the weight of the situation still hung over us. We had a long way to go, but at that moment, I felt more connected to Kelly than I had in a long time. We were in this together, and I was determined to keep fighting for us. The road ahead would not be easy, but I was ready to face it, one step at a time. The weeks turned into a month, and Kelly and I were navigating the treacherous waters of rebuilding our relationship. It wasn't easy. Every day felt like a new challenge. There were moments of laughter, but they were often punctuated by reminders of the betrayal, like an invisible cloud lingering over us. We were learning to communicate better, but the shadow of Kelly's affair with Mark still loomed large. Therapy sessions became a crucial part. Our routine. We learned to express our feelings, frustrations, fears, and hopes we'd buried. It was uncomfortable but necessary. I found myself opening up more than I ever had, sharing not only my hurt but also my feelings of inadequacy that had allowed us to drift apart. Kelly, too, revealed the struggles she'd faced, feeling unappreciated and disconnected as life's routine consumed us. One evening, after a particularly intense session, we sat in silence at home, both lost in our thoughts. I turned to her, wanting to break the stillness. "Do you think we can really rebuild? Can we get back to where we were?" Her gaze was steady, and for the first time since this all began, I saw a glimmer of hope in her eyes. "I believe we can, but it's going to take time. I'm committed to working on us, Brian. I don't want to throw away what we have." "Then let's continue to put in the effort," I said, feeling a surge of determination. "We can find a way back to each other." As we continued to work through our issues, I also kept a watchful eye on Mark. He seemed to be keeping a low profile after our confrontation, likely trying to salvage whatever reputation he had left. I heard whispers in the wine community about how he had been struggling to regain his footing. It felt good to know that my intervention had some effect, but I also realized that I didn't want to be consumed by vengeance. I wanted to move forward, not dwell in the past. One chilly evening, as we prepared dinner together, Kelly opened up again about her feelings. "I've been thinking a lot about how I got into that situation with Mark. I thought I needed excitement, but I realize now that I was seeking validation in all the wrong places." "I understand that," I replied, stirring the sauce on the stove. "But you have to know that our relationship can be that excitement too. It's about finding new ways to connect." She turned to face me, her expression earnest. "Can we try to do things differently? Go on dates again, rediscover what we loved about each other?" I smiled, feeling warmth spread through me. "Absolutely. Let's plan something special this weekend, just the two of us." The idea of rekindling our romance felt invigorating. We started planning a weekend getaway, a chance to escape the noise of our everyday lives and reconnect. The anticipation of that trip provided a much-needed distraction from the heaviness of our recent past. As the weekend approached, I felt a mix of excitement and anxiety. Would we be able to let go of everything that had happened? Could we truly start anew? I couldn't shake the worry that the specter of Mark would still linger. Finally, the day arrived and we set off on our trip. We drove out to a cozy cabin in the mountains, surrounded by nature. The air was crisp and the scenery was breathtaking. As we settled in, I watched Kelly take a deep breath, her shoulders relaxing for the first time in weeks. "This place is beautiful," she said, her eyes sparkling as she looked around. "I can already feel the weight lifting." We spent our days hiking, enjoying the fresh air and each other's company. We talked and laughed like we hadn't in a long time. In those moments, I felt a sense of peace settle over us. We were rediscovering the joy we once had, and it rekindled my hope for the future. One evening, as we sat on the porch watching the sunset, I turned to Kelly. "I can see the change in you and it makes me hopeful. I want to believe we can get through this." Kelly smiled, her eyes glistening in the fading light. "I want that too. I'm so thankful for you, Brian. I didn't realize how much I was taking you for granted until it was almost too late." We shared a quiet moment, the warmth of our connection palpable. But as we embraced, my mind drifted back to Mark. I couldn't help but wonder if he would try to worm his way back into her life. That thought gnawed at me, and I decided to address it. "Do you think he'll try to contact you again?" I asked, trying to keep my tone light but failing to hide the tension in my voice. "I don't know," she said, her expression growing serious. "I'm not going to let him back into my life, I promise you that." "I trust you," I replied, but the insecurity lingered. I knew deep down that trust would take time to rebuild fully. "But if he does reach out, you have to let me know. No secrets this time." "Of course," she assured me, leaning in for another embrace. "This is about us now, no one else." The weekend passed in a blur of laughter and reconnection, and it felt like we were finally on the right path. But as we returned home, the weight of reality crashed back down. I kept my guard up, anticipating the worst. Sure enough, just days later, I received a text from an unknown number. My heart raced as I opened it. It was Mark. The message was simple: "I need to talk to you and Kelly. We need to settle this." Panic coursed through me, and I showed the message to Kelly, anxiety bubbling in my chest. "He's trying to reach out again," I said, my voice tight. "What does he want?" she asked, her expression twisting into a mix of anger and fear. "I don't know, but we can't let him back in. We've come too far to let him ruin this again," I said, my tone firm. Kelly nodded, determination setting in. "I won't engage with him. We can handle this together." We spent the next few days strategizing on how to handle the situation. I knew we had to confront Mark together, but I also wanted to make it clear that we were united. I refused to let him manipulate the situation or create any more chaos in our lives. Finally, we decided to meet Mark in a neutral location, a public coffee shop where we could maintain some control over the situation. As we sat at a table waiting for him to arrive, the tension was palpable. I could see the fear in Kelly's eyes, and I reached for her hand, squeezing it for comfort. When Mark walked in, he seemed different, more frantic, almost desperate. He spotted us and made his way to our table, sitting down without waiting for an invitation. "Thanks for meeting me," he began, his tone defensive. "I think we need to clear the air." "Clear the air," I echoed, incredulous. "You've done enough damage already, Mark. What more could you possibly want?" He glanced at Kelly, his expression softening slightly. "I didn't mean to hurt you, Kelly. I thought we had something special. It was a mistake, and I regret it." "Regret?" I scoffed. "You had no problem taking advantage of her when it suited you. You don't get to play the remorseful lover now." Mark turned his attention to Kelly. "I just think we should talk about what happened. This could all be resolved if we were honest." Kelly's expression hardened. "I don't want to talk to you. You're the reason I lost sight of what I had. I won't let you manipulate me again." His eyes narrowed, frustration bubbling to the surface. "I'm not trying to manipulate anyone. I just want to be clear. I care about you, and I don't want to lose you." "Too late for that," I interjected, my anger flaring. "You lost any right to claim that when you chose to pursue her behind my back. You don't get to dictate how this ends. You've already lost." Mark leaned back, his bravado slipping. "But I can still get her back if you let me." "No," Kelly said firmly. "I've made my choice. I want my marriage, and I'm not interested in what you have to offer." The silence hung heavy between us, and I could see the realization dawning on Mark that he had lost this battle. He opened his mouth to respond, but then closed it, his expression shifting from anger to defeat. "I see how this is," he said bitterly. "You've chosen him, and I get it. Just know that I won't be forgotten." "Neither will you," I replied, my voice steady. "But don't think for a second that we'll let you disrupt our lives again. You had your chance, and now it's over." With that, he stood up, his chair scraping harshly against the floor. He shot Kelly one last look, a mix of anger and sadness, before storming out of the cafe. As he left, I turned to Kelly, taking a deep breath. "Are you okay?" She nodded, but I could see the emotional toll it had taken. "I'm just glad we stood up to him together." "Me too," I said, relief flooding through me. "I want you to know that I'm here for you, and we'll face whatever comes next together." "Thank you for being so strong," she replied, her eyes filling with tears. "I don't deserve it, but I'm grateful for you." We shared a moment, holding each other tightly, knowing that this was just one step in a long journey toward healing. We had emerged stronger, united against the chaos that had threatened to tear us apart. It wouldn't be easy, but we were committed to moving forward together, and I knew we could face whatever challenges lay ahead. The aftermath of our confrontation with Mark felt overwhelming, but as the days passed, Kelly and I began to find our footing again. We were committed to putting in the work to rebuild our relationship, and I could see glimmers of the love we once shared emerging from the darkness. The road ahead was still rocky, but we were determined to navigate it together. In the weeks that followed, we continued our therapy sessions, focusing on communication and rebuilding trust. Every session brought us closer, helping us peel back the layers of hurt and resentment that had built up over time. We learned to express our needs and desires openly, becoming more vulnerable with each other. It was a slow process, but I finally felt like we were making genuine progress. One evening, as we sat together on the couch, I looked over at Kelly. She had changed in many ways since the affair, becoming more aware of her actions and her impact on our relationship. "You know," I said, breaking the comfortable silence, "I can see you're trying. It means a lot." She smiled, the warmth reaching her eyes. "I want to make this work, Brian. I've realized what I had with you is worth fighting for. I don't want to lose you again." We spent that night talking about our dreams and aspirations, the things that made us happy, and the things we wanted to accomplish together. It felt liberating to share our thoughts, and I could sense the bond between us strengthening. In those moments, I realized how easy it had been to take each other for granted amidst the monotony of daily life. As the months went by, we focused on reestablishing traditions that had faded away. We went out on regular date nights, trying new restaurants and revisiting old favorites. We took weekend trips, exploring nearby towns and reconnecting with each other in more relaxed settings. In the process, we found joy in the little things: a shared laugh, a simple touch, a playful argument over what to watch on Netflix. But the past wasn't completely behind us. Occasionally, I would find myself feeling a pang of jealousy, a reminder of the betrayal. I tried to push those feelings aside, reminding myself of the progress we were making. Kelly continued to reassure me of her commitment, often citing moments of doubt she had faced and the determination she felt to prove her love for me. One day, as we were preparing for a weekend getaway, Kelly turned to me with a serious expression. "I want to talk about something," she said, her voice steady. "Sure, what's on your mind?" I asked, feeling a flutter of anxiety. "I've been thinking about how we can move forward," she began, a hint of vulnerability in her tone. "I want to make sure we're both on the same page. Can we talk about what happens if Mark tries to reach out again?" I nodded, grateful that she was willing to address the elephant in the room. "I think we need to set some boundaries. If he contacts you, you need to tell me right away, no secrets." "Absolutely," she agreed. "And if I feel tempted or pressured in any way, I promise to be honest with you about it. I don't want to risk what we've built." The conversation felt like a turning point. We were no longer just cautiously rebuilding. We were actively creating a new foundation based on transparency and mutual respect. It was empowering to know we were in this together, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. As we drove out to the cabin we had visited before, I felt a sense of excitement wash over me. The beauty of the mountains was breathtaking, and I was eager to spend quality time with Kelly, away from the noise of our daily lives. We arrived at the cabin, and the familiar sights and sounds welcomed us back. That evening, we cooked dinner together, the laughter and playful banter echoing through the cabin. We talked about our future, our hopes, and the dreams we had put aside. It felt good to share those aspirations, to imagine what we could achieve together. After dinner, we settled onto the porch, wrapped in blankets as the sun began to set. The colors painted across the sky were mesmerizing, and I took a moment to soak it all in. This was the essence of what I had missed, the simple moments of togetherness and connection. "Do you remember our first trip here?" Kelly asked, her voice soft and nostalgic. I nodded, smiling at the memory. "How could I forget? You insisted on trying to roast marshmallows over the fire, and we ended up with more smoke than fire." She laughed, the sound music to my ears. "You were so patient, even when I kept making them burn. And I remember you saying they were gourmet," I teased. "That's because I was trying to justify the disaster," she replied, her eyes sparkling with mischief. We shared stories and laughter, and in those moments I felt the weight of the past begin to lift. It was as if the healing had truly begun. The cabin, with its familiar warmth, felt like the perfect backdrop for our newfound connection. As the stars began to twinkle in the night sky, I turned to Kelly, my heart full. "I'm so grateful for this moment with you. We've come a long way. And I want you to know that I believe in us." "I believe in us too, Brian," she said, her voice sincere. "I know we can face anything together." As I looked into her eyes, I felt a surge of hope. Yes, we had endured a painful chapter, but we were now writing a new story, one filled with love, understanding, and resilience. The road ahead would require effort and commitment, but I was ready to face it all, hand in hand with the woman I loved. We sat in comfortable silence, the stars shimmering above us, and for the first time in a long time, I felt a profound sense of peace wash over me. No matter what the future held, I knew that we had the strength to face it together. Our love had been tested, but now it was stronger than ever, and I was determined to protect it at all costs.